Welcome to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast with your host, Brandon Seigel. I'm a published author, speaker, entrepreneur, and private practice strategist dedicated to transforming the way that healthcare functions. This podcast is all about empowering you to create the change you want to see. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Seigel. In this episode, we're talking about creating your practice's decision-making framework. So the fastest growing practices aren't run by the smartest owners. They're actually run by owners who've built systems that make smart decisions without them. And so I always say, systems run companies, people run systems. And so today we're going to talk all about that. And here's the bottom line. There's a real cost of centralized decision making. So if every decision in your practice flows exactly through you, you are not running a business. You are running a job. And even recently, on an interview with Scott that you may have seen, I asked him, I said, Scott, what is the percentage of decisions you make that I'm actually involved in? And we both agreed it was under 20%. And so recognizing that if every decision comes through you, it's going to be a very exhaustive job. And so every time a team member asks you what to do in a situation you've seen 100 times before, your practice has a systematic problem, not a people problem. Again, systematic problem. People should be able to learn and do through policies, procedures, videos, things like that. They should be given the opportunity to lead their role, to run with their role, to own their role, to treat it like it's their business. And I say, the biggest thing I look for in my employees is that they treat my business as their business. And giving them the resources, the tools, and the systems are where it's at. So the goal is not to make better decisions yourself. The goal is to build a practice that makes good decisions without you in the room. I mean, that's the optimum thing. And that takes time and that takes systems. But there is this hidden cost of being the bottleneck of your practice. And so 68% practice owners who make all decisions spend 68% of their time on tasks that could be delegated. That was from the Harvard Business Review. Teams with clear decision-making authority are 2.6 times more likely to be high-performing. The average practice owner who is interrupted 7 to 12 times per day for decisions under $500. I'm going to say that again because that's crazy. The average practice owner is interrupted 7 to 12 times per day for decisions under $500. How is that a good use of time? Practices with documented decision frameworks report 31% faster response times to issues. And owners who delegate effectively work 11 fewer hours per week on average. Every decision you make personally is a decision your team didn't make. And every decision your team doesn't make is a skill they never developed. So the bottleneck isn't protecting quality, it's preventing growth. And so I think it is so important that you understand that your growth is your team. It takes a village. You got to let that village do what it does and bring people in who can make actually better decisions than you and systems that drive that decision-making power. So I love this idea of building your if-then decision trees. So an if-then decision tree converts your judgment into a repeatable protocol. Instead of being called every time a patient no-shows, your team already knows exactly what to do because you wrote it down once and you train them on it. This is how you delegate decisions, not just tasks. So patient no-shows, example. If a patient no-shows once, send a warm reschedule message within 2 hours. If they no-show twice, flag for provider review before rescheduling. If they no-show 3 times, manager calls required before next appointment. This is just an example of if-then. Patient complains. If the complaint is billing related, front desk resolves up to $50. Management resolves up to $200. If the complaint involves a clinical interaction, provider must be notified within 1 hour. If written or online, respond within 24 hours using approved language. Again, not telling you to follow those prompts, but showing you the if-then decision tree action. Supply shortages. If inventory drops below threshold, reorder immediately using approved vendor list. If vendor is out of stock, escalate to manager with 2 alternative identified. And then if shortage affects same-day care, notify provider and manager immediately. Again, giving that if-then decision tree is going to build that. So when you're building this, you don't need a flowchart software. You could start with a simple spreadsheet or document. For each tree, answer the following 3 questions, and you'll have a working protocol in under 30 minutes per scenario. So here are the 3 things. What triggers this decision? So identify the specific event or condition that initiates a decision. Be precise. A patient is unhappy is too vague. A patient cancels mid-treatment citing cost concerns is a trigger. A therapist calls in sick with no notice. What do we do with their schedule? That is a trigger, those different things. What are the possible branches? List 2 to 4 variations of the scenario. Each variation needs its own path. The more specific you are, the more empowered your team will become. And so the last one, which is really important, who owns each branch? Every branch ends with a name or a role and a specific action. Someone handles it means no one handles it. Name the role: front desk, office manager, billing manager, provider, owner, whatever that may be. So write down the top 5 questions your team asks you more than once a month. Again, write down 5 questions your team asks you more than 5 times a month. Those 5 things should all have decision trees by the end of this quarter. Start with 1 this week. Pick the one that interrupts you the most often. Document exactly what you always say. That's your first protocol. And so it's so important that you recognize we have to listen to what is the most frequent interrupting question. We need to build our decision tree around that. And so one of the things that I also like to talk about is this idea of the rapid decision framework. So rapid is a decision-making framework developed by Bain & Company. And it's used by some of truly the world's best run organizations. And it's particularly powerful with small practices because it eliminates the ambiguity of who decides what, the root cause of most team friction. And so here's the deal. Are you ready? Rapid stands for R, recommended, the person who gathers information and proposes a course of action, usually the team member closest to the issue. A, agree, anyone whose input is required before a decision can be made. Keep this list short. Every A shows the process. So A is who agrees. P, perform, the person who executes the decision once it's made. They need to be involved early so they can flag implementation issues. I, input, people who should be consulted but don't have veto power. The perspective improves the decision without blocking it. D, decide, the single person with final authority. One person, not a committee. Committees don't decide, they delay. Map your top 10 reoccurring decisions to this framework. You'll immediately see where the bottlenecks live. My viewpoint is HR, anything related to employees' performance, pay, everything, HR makes that decision. Your clinical directors don't even get to decide over HR. HR owns people. Clinician and clinical director, they can make clinical decisions. But looking at that and deciding who's part of that and everything. I never understand why we put people in power that don't know how to manage people. HR manages people. That's why we hire them. That's why they are the top of the food chain, because they keep us compliant. They build our culture. They keep us accountable. Clinicians in clinical care keep our accountability. I'm never going to have HR decide on a clinical decision as it relates to patient care outcomes, etc. So just again, looking at this framework of recommend, agree, perform, input, decide. Who are your decision makers? Who needs input? Who performs? So in this idea of like firing a therapist, okay. So the recommended person who gathers the information and proposes a course of action for this is going to be probably HR. Anyone whose input is required before a decision can be made. Typically, the clinical director will be part of that. Typically, anyone involved in the incident, and potentially me as the executive director. Perform. Technically, HR is typically performing that input. We may get input from other staff. Decide. HR actually is the decision factor. Sometimes it's me as the executive director. It depends on the circumstance. So we build that out accordingly. So the other thing that I find is that we run all money through one person. We need to create spending authority levels. Every time a team member has to find you to approve a $40 supply purchase, you've created a bottleneck. Create a budget, allow them to perform in that budget, and then if it goes or exceeds the budget, then they put in a proposal for things that are not budgeted already. Spending authority levels, they remove the bottleneck. And so while still giving you oversight, the result is a faster, more autonomous team, people that can actually push through and make changes. And so part of decision making is data and driving time. Like, what does it take? And so design your spending authority matrix. There's no universal dollar amount. The right threshold depends on your practice's component, but sometimes it's a matter of front desk can make a decision up to $50. Office manager, it's up to $500. Practice owner up to above $2,000, whatever that is. So you can create some of that matrix work, but ultimately, the benefits of a clear spending authority matrix extend far beyond convenience. It's a trust signal, and trust is one of the most powerful retention tools a practice owner can have. So it really does free up the owner, the manager, and the team when we are able to create that. And fewer interruptions will allow your owners to do what they need to do. The manager, there's a trust signal, and the team, clear rules reduce anxiety. And so I think it's just really critical. And so how many purchase decisions did you personally approve last month that cost less than $200? If the answer is more than 5, you're spending your leadership capital on things a well-designed system could handle automatically. Spending authority isn't about letting go of control. It's actually about directing your control where it actually creates value. And so I think this is something that you could implement today, and it would change the game in your decision power and prioritization. And so something else that I use is like a decision tool. I talk about the 10-10-10 rule for high stake decisions. When the stakes are high and the pressure is on, most practice owners either decide too fast, which is their gut reaction, or too slow, which is paralysis by analysis. The 10-10-10 rule, which is popularized by Susie Welch, okay? Simple mental model, and it's going to force your perspective before you commit. So 10 minutes. How will I feel about this decision in 10 minutes? This filters out emotional reactivity. If you're angry, scared, or flattered right now, this question creates a pause. 10 months. How will I feel about this decision in 10 months? This is the medium-term lens. Will this still matter? Will this consequences be playing out? 10 years. How will I feel about the decision in 10 years? This is the legacy lens. Does this align with the practice I'm building and the leader I want to be? So I'll give you an example, and maybe it's not a good example, but we'll just say decision of whether I need to go out of network with all my insurances. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to freak out. I'm going to feel a lot of fear and anxiety because I don't know how this is going to impact all my clients if I'm going out of network. 10 months, it's going to feel liberating because I'm going to be able to create on a different level. 10 years, I don't know what the sustainability of this would be over 10 years, just from a decision standpoint. And so you want to apply this to hiring decisions, firing decisions, major equipment purchases, partnership agreements, any decision you're being pressured to make too quickly. Speed is a virtue in execution. It's a liability in decision making. The best leaders are fast to act and slow to decide. And that was actually by Annie Duke, Thinking in Bets. And I love that. And so one of the things that sometimes helps is building a decision journal. So most practice owners make dozens of significant decisions every month and learn almost nothing from them because they never look back. And so the decision journal is simple, and I find it to be transformative. Record your important decisions, document your reasoning for that decision, predict your expected outcome, and then review quarterly to see how that judgment is actually performing. And I think you're going to find that review will allow you to also build confidence in your decision-making process. And so keep it simple enough so that you actually do it. 5 fields per decision is all you need. Over time, these entries will reveal patterns in how you think, your biases, your blind spots, your strengths. It's going to give you more context over the course of time as you look at it. And so, think about these 5 fields. The decision. I want you to describe what you decided in 1 or 2 clear sentences. Be specific enough that you'll remember the context in 6 months. Then I want you to discuss your reasoning. Why did you choose this option over alternatives? What information did you have? And what were you uncertain about? Okay. Then we need to look at the expected outcome. What do you expect will actually happen as a result? Set a measurable prediction so your quarterly review has something concrete to evaluate. Then we need to rate our confidence level. How confident are we? 1 to 10, 1 being low. Confidence decisions deserve extra attention at review time, and they will reveal, what really mattered when you made that decision. Where was your your confidence at? And so 1 being low, 10 being high, you get the point. And then the actual outcome that you fill in later. This is when you do your quarterly review. Reach a point where you're going to return to each entry and record what actually happened. The gap between predicted and actual is your learning. And so predicted this to happen and this actually happened. Just knowing that is really critical. And so set aside 60 minutes at the end of each quarter for your decision journal. This is not a therapy decision. It's not a therapy session. It's a performance review for your judgment. Where was I right? Where was I wrong? What patterns keep coming up? And so building a culture of accountability, I think, is crucial in today's environment. And one of the things I want to recognize is that leadership and responsibility is something every single person on your team should need, and we should not be micromanaging. So decision-making frameworks only work if your team is actually using them. And so teams only use them consistently when accountability is baked into the culture, not enforced through surveillance. If I have to double check everything, so I always say, I do not micromanage, I trust. And if you drown me, I will not rely on you again. So there's a critical difference between a culture of accountability and a culture of fear. Now, what I might have just said creates fear, but at the end of the day, accountability is like own your place, create it, treat it like your own. So clarity before accountability. You can't hold someone accountable for a standard they don't know exists. Document expectations before measuring performance against them. Accountability is a two-way street. When you hold your team accountable, you must also hold yourself accountable. If you change the rules mid-game, own it publicly. And I always say, I will fall on my sword 1,000,000 times if it means my team will create better accountability for all of us. This is a team sport, and you need to separate the person from performance. That decision didn't work is a learning conversation. You're always making bad decisions. That's a morale killer. So one builds capability, the other destroys it. So I don't even personally like this. That decision didn't work. I'd rather be like, hey, these were the results of the decision. How would you rank effectiveness of that decision on a 1-10-6? How can we make it better? How would it have been worse? Let's learn from it. Celebrate accountability wins. When a team member catches their own mistake, brings it to you proactively, that's the behavior you want. Reward it visibly. Thank you for owning up to it. Thank you for fixing it. Thank you. Mistakes happen. I got you. So accountability without support is punishment. Support without accountability is enabling. The sweet spot is where great teams live. And I'm going to say that again. Patrick Lencioni is one of my favorites. Accountability without support is punishment. I love that. Support without accountability is enabling. I love that. The sweet spot is where great teams live. Brilliant. So at the end of the day, we know there are people out there that teach us so much. And, Charles Darwin says it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. I think we are change makers. I think this Charles Darwin quote should be on every wall in healthcare. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change. Jim Rohn, you cannot make progress without making decisions. And Theodore Roosevelt, in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is nothing. So great decisions make great learnable skills, not a personal trait. And so the practice owners who build the most resilient organizations are not the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who have built systems that make good decisions consistently, learn from the bad ones quickly, and never make the same mistake twice. Plain and simple. And so the best investors in the world keep decision journals. Ray Dalio built an entire company culture around it. The principle is simple. If you never look back at your decisions, you never improve at making them. You just keep repeating the same patterns. Some good, some costly, without ever knowing the difference. I think it's so important that we journal these things. I look at all the decisions that I've made, whether it be hiring, firing, taking on new clients, making executive decisions, all those things. And I evaluate what was right and wrong. But honestly, the ones that were wrong are the ones that are exciting for me to learn and grow from. So our quick recap for this episode. I want you to build if-then trees. Convert your best judgment into repeatable protocols. Document common scenarios so your team can decide without pulling into every answer, question, this or that. Disconnect through building your if-then trees. Then I need you to define some spending authority. Set clear dollar thresholds by roles. Reduce bottlenecks. Build trust and free your leadership capacity for decisions that actually require it. And then the third thing is I want you to keep a decision journal. Record decisions, reasoning, predicted outcomes. Review quarterly the gap between expectation and reality so that you know where that growth lives. And I just, I think it's so important that you understand that great practices don't depend on brilliant people making great decisions in the moment. They depend on the systems that produce great outcomes reliably. So I so appreciate you listening to this episode, tuning in. Please like us, subscribe, write a review. If you are in need of medical billing, if you are in need of fractional HR, reach out to me directly. We'll set up a discovery call. Would love to help your organization optimize the way it functions, optimize the way it generates revenue, because together we can thrive, not just survive. Thank you for tuning in to the Private Practice Survival Guide podcast. I'm incredibly grateful to each and every one of you. Exciting news. We're now available everywhere, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts to YouTube or anywhere you like to listen to your podcasts. So watch, listen, and reach out. If you love this episode, please drop a 5-star review. It truly means the world to me. Are you looking for more ways to elevate your practice? If so, now is your chance. Reach out, go to my website, or email me at brandon@wellnessworksmp.com. And remember, it's not just about surviving, it's about thriving.